Hello. Today I'm going to do a bit of an introduction to Clip Studio Paint for people that are transitioning from Photoshop. There's a lot of these videos online, so I recommend that you watch some of the others, and maybe I'll put some links in the comments to some that I found useful. This is the newest version of Clip Studio Paint 3. At least I think it's the newest version. I updated it in, I think, September or something. And the only thing I noticed that they really added was this, which are brush controls. So if I have my brush here, it changes the size. If you watch the middle of the page, that's the size, and then this is the opacity, which you'll see right here. If you watch this number when I'm dialing this up and down, it will do that. So this is a new feature. This is what the UI looks like. I set it to kind of a default, so I think this might be what you have when you open it the first time, but I can't really remember because I customized my setup. There's a lot to look at. So it can seem kind of confusing, but there's a lot of stuff on here that you might not use if you're coloring comics or drawing comics and you're not doing animation or whatever other stuff. So like it has this timeline on the bottom. First thing I do is get rid of that because I don't need that. So it's right there. I should show it and it should hide it. Now it's gone. And then you'd have to double click on this to have it take up the full space. At the top here, it shows what your color preview is for this file. If you don't want to see that, you hit Shift Tab and it hides that. That's right here, hide title bar. But right there, it's showing us how our preview color is. So if your color profile that you're using, you go here to do that. And we can change this to relative colorimetric, Adobe RGB. You can preview in CMYK as well, but it doesn't do a great job of that. It'll look much grayer. And that's not the colors I want. I usually use Adobe RGB and then I do my conversion in Affinity, and it usually is pretty close to that unless I've gone out of gamut into non-safe colors that won't print in CMYK. Those will, they'll have to be made into CMYK. So those will differ if I blow out the color. But generally, this is fairly close. So I usually hide that because I don't want it taking up my screen real estate. At the top here, you'll have other things up here. I took them out. So right now, all I have here is my history, which is showing over there because this layout is weird. That's not my usual layout. I'm going to keep this for now, and then I'll show you my normal layout. But I put my history there. You can customize this by going here and going Command Bar Settings, and then you can add anything you want from there. And from what I remember, you can also drag brushes up there. So if I wanted, let's say this one, I think you can just drag it up there. And then it's up there. Okay. Layers. Okay, you don't have channels. This is an RGB program, and they don't use channels. They do use selection layers. So if you want to save something, you go, say you made a selection and you wanted to save it. I'll discuss this in a minute. Then you would go to, let's see, convert to selection layer. I set up a hotkey, so Shift S, convert to selection layer. And that's kind of like a channel. I use those and just layers as replacement for channels. And if I double click, or maybe it's just clicking, let's see. Yeah, if I click on that box, if I click here, well, it does it there too. Usually I click on the box, but I thought it was there. So anyway, if I click twice there, or once there, that's what it looks like, then you can save selections up there, and they kind of act like channels. And then if you save this out in as a PSD and open it in Photoshop, I think it would show those as channels, if I remember correctly, like alpha channels. Layers are mostly the same, but one thing you'll notice is that you have Add Glow as a color mode that Photoshop does not have, and that's really cool. It's like a super screen mode. It's really great for glows. If you're going to do glows of like lights over top of your line art, it works great. I recommend you check that out. If you save this out as a PSD, Photoshop will use that as like an add layer or something like that. But other than that, the layers are generally pretty much the same. When you make a group, it defaults to normal. So if you have like glow layers and stuff in there and you want pass through, you have to select through. So that's one difference. Layer properties, that's the property of that layer. So there you go. It doesn't say RGB or CMYK, it's just color. Or you can do other stuff, gray, monochrome. There's some cool effects you can get in there, but we're just going to do an intro right now. Has a navigator, same as Photoshop, same as most programs. So if you're zoomed in, if I'm in here, I can drag around. I don't use any of this, so my layout, I got rid of it, but they have lots of their kind of materials and things, none of which, I don't use any of this stuff, so I got rid of this so that it's not showing and not taking up my screen real estate. One cool thing here, look, check this out. You can flop your page. Sometimes if you're doing drawing, it's good to flop the page to make sure your figure drawing is not bad or awkward or lopsided. You can flip there, there, there. You can zoom in and out with these plus and minus buttons. Zoom tool. Let's see, what else? This thing is cool, you know, color wheel. Color, like swatches, sliders, you can go HSV, CMYK, RGB. This is for mixing, so if you want to, no, where's the brush? You need a brush. Choose the brush, choose the color. And if you press slider, you can smear and do that. And then take the eyedropper and select it, and then see there. Now I have that color selected. This is, I think this is recent. You know, just different stuff. It'll show all those, like these here. That's what those are. So color wheel. Okay. Here's your brush size if you have a use for that. But if you have a brush, same as in Photoshop, if you hit Option or Alt or whatever that key is on your, I have a Windows keyboard, but I'm working on a Mac, so mine says Opt. Opt Command, I can change the brush size. Or if you get the new version, you can do it here, or you can do it here. Some of them, you might hide some of these things if you don't use them. I usually just use the hotkey for the Opt Command and do that. It's if you're painting, it's good to get used to that. I have these over here and have the smaller ones because sometimes to get the really small ones if I'm doing something like writing my signature for a document or whatever, I don't know. Sometimes I need those small ones. Brush, a tool property. So whatever tool you're in, it'll show. So if I'm in the zoom tool, if I'm in the brush, if I'm in the lasso, this will change. And then these are the subtools within the set of tools, okay? And you have all these settings, like it might show a lot more settings than I have here because I turn things off so they're not visible because I get annoyed. If you want to see all the options, click that little thing, that little wrench, and then you can make things visible there. Watch, I'll move it over here so it's easier to track by turning on the little eyeball. Then it'll show it. Turn it off, turn it on. So for brushes, that can be particularly useful because there's a lot of controls and sometimes you don't want to see all those. And once you've set your brushes up, you don't need to see all those things. You might just want to change a couple things. So I've hidden a lot of my settings. I won't go over all the brush settings because there's a bunch of them, but it's not that hard to learn. And you can import your Photoshop brushes into Clip Studio Paint pretty easily. To import Photoshop brushes, just export them from Photoshop as an ABR file. You can export them as single brushes or whole groups of brushes, and you just drag and drop them. So open a brush tool. I press B to get a brush, and then it'll have this open here, right? You do it for whatever tool you want to import. If you want it to be a pen or a pencil or whatever, I hit P for pen, A for airbrush, B for brushes that are just paint brushes. So drop them in wherever you want them, however you organize your setup. Now, I have a Finder open with my brushes here. It's on another monitor, but I don't want to click on it because then I lose focus on Clip Studio Paint. So I put it on another monitor, and then I make sure I have focus on Clip Studio Paint so I can drag and drop that here. I'm going to drag 4 brushes. and it created a tab because it had multiple brushes. It didn't drop them one by one in the tab that I was in. It created its own tab. But if I do just a single brush, it will add it there. If I drag a single brush up here, it still adds it there. It doesn't create a tab. So that's how you import brushes. And then go ahead and mess around with them and see if they work for you. For me, all the Photoshop brushes I imported that I've had time to try have all worked great with no problems at all. Some of your brushes might not. Some of the settings might be different in Clip Studio Paint in such a way that they've changed their behavior. So give it a try and see what works for you. You can add kind of groups and group brushes together. And if you want to make a new group, you could just drag a brush from here onto there and it'll make a new tab. And then you can have your different kinds of brushes. Favorites, bristle, FX, whatever. You maybe recognize some of these. These are Photoshop brushes that I've dragged here. Of course, just like any program, you have all your tools here. If you find you don't use one of them at all, you can go here and right click and actually delete it so that you clear up real estate on there. I've kept most of mine there because I'm like, maybe one day I'll use it. One thing that should probably happen by default is you'll have this pop up, and that's right now it's selection launcher. Okay. And you can customize that and right click on it and go to selection launcher settings, and you can add things to that as well. So if you want that, I personally turn it off because I do a lot of this and I don't feel like having that thing pop up all the time. So view selection launcher turned off, and then it doesn't happen. One thing I did with this tool is I set the lasso tool so it's always plus right there, the selection mode. If you have to that, when you do a new one, it will deselect the old one unless you're holding the shift key just like in Photoshop. But for me, it's faster to just have the default add to it. And then if I don't want to, I can hold minus to subtract, just like in, not minus, option or alt to subtract, just like in Photoshop. It doesn't have the ability to switch to a polygon lasso tool on the fly while you're tracing. So you do that, and then you can switch to polyline. And that's mine also, I put default to plus. That works the same as Photoshop. And if I hit Alt, it's subtract. Usual, those kind of tools. The lasso fill, I go over in another video. That's here. That's actually generally in this area where the figures are, but I moved mine, which I cover in that other video, which you'll see linked at the top of the screen. It just fills whatever you trace. So it's not a lasso tool. You'll notice it didn't make a selection. It's just like a pen tool, except it's tracing out. I mean, it's filling within whatever you drew. So that one's really cool. They have these tools for flatting. I'm not going to go over that because that takes a while to go over. And there's lots of people that cover flatting in Clip Studio Paint, and it works much, much better than Photoshop. It's a feature that's really cool. Reference layers are a cool thing in Clip Studio Paint. So if you're on a layer and you click this right here, that's right, selected. This is now a reference layer. If I go onto this layer and I hit the magic wand and I click this on here, refer to multiple, and this is the reference layer. When I click on there, it's referencing that layer when it's making a selection instead of referencing that layer. So that can be kind of a quick tool. If I change a layer, it's still referencing that layer when it's doing that magic wand. So that's kind of a cool feature. And if you open multiple pages, they'll open in tabs up here, but you can reorganize those however you want. If you want, you can drag them next to each other. You can drag them on top of one another. So you can have multiple pages open. I do that on my second monitor sometimes when I have, when I need reference, or I'll open the pages side to side. when I need to copy colors from one page to the other. And that's kind of cool. And the whole UI is very customizable. You can dock palettes. These are called palettes. These windows are called palettes. You can drag them out, and you can drag them into other areas if you want them there. And then say I wanted layer property in there. Do that. Then I have layers, layer property. I drag that back there. Or drag that back there. Then they're on tabs, layer, and then layer properties there. Auto actions are another thing that's cool in Clip Studio Paint. It's very similar to actions in Photoshop. You record actions that you do, and then you can play them back on another document or whatever. So you can move these things around. You can resize them. If you drag your cursor there, you can resize them. Once you're finished with them and you're happy with how they're set up, you can lock all these things here so that you don't accidentally, when you're moving your page around and stuff, have a problem there. Another window that's cool is, let's see, quick access. With that one, you can add all sorts of stuff in there. You can drag brushes in there, which is what I've done. You can put actions in there. You right click and you go quick access settings, and then here you can find menu commands and you can add them to it. So if I go like this and I go new, then you'd click add and it would add it onto there. And you can put that palette anywhere. So if you have a lot of brushes you use, if you want, you can dock it up here. I think I had it up here at first. And that's also, you can size it if you don't want it to take up a bunch of room. You can have it settings. I think it's up here. That's where it is. If you don't want to show the list, let's see. View. List medium. If you want it just to be tile for columns, like that. So if you know which brushes you're using and you just want the icon, and then those icons you can change. Subtool settings. You can change the colors of the icon, the background of the icon. So if you have different brushes, and then you can also change the icon here by doing. So you go here and you go to subtool settings, and then you would, if you want to load your own icon, you go here, and then you can upload something. You save a tiny file, and then you can change the background color. So like some of these icons are ones that I made. So that's cool to be able to customize like that. Hotkeys are here, shortcut settings. Options, pop-up palettes are cool. So for instance, if you want, I have that heads-up color display. When I hit C, it does that. That's a pop-up palette. So if you go to shortcut settings and you go to pop-up palettes, color wheel, you set it there. You can go there and set whatever you want, like edit shortcut, and then see if any of these are useful for you. If you want to pop up. The cool thing about those is they pop up wherever the cursor is. So if I hit C and my cursor's there, if I go over there, there. If I move over here, it's there. So I use that a lot to change colors. You can also change what that shows, depending on which one you want. I like the square. You have to get used to it though, because you think that you have to close it or something. You don't have to close it. You can have settings here though, that's going to do the same thing as that there. But if you just hit C again, or if you hit C and then you change a color and then you just start drawing, it won't draw, but it'll drop that pop-up and then it'll draw. I'm not on the right layer for it to do anything anyway, so there. So if I go there and I change the color and then I start drawing, the first stroke won't draw, it'll just drop the palette. And then after that, it'll draw. Anyway, the other hotkeys are also there, so you can match a lot of those to what you're used to in Photoshop. So you can go to Options, Menu Commands, Pop-up Palettes, Tools. You can add different hotkeys for different brushes too. So if you have different, like the actual brush can, instead of just choosing brush, you could apply a hotkey for a specific brush, which is pretty cool. So it shows those tabs. I have my brushes here. You see that tab there, Faves, shows Faves. PS, that's there, that tab. So you could take any of your brushes and add a hotkey for that specific brush. One thing to get used to is the way that this app copies layers. I'm just going to flatten this one so that we have one layer and it's easy to show. Flatten this one. To get a layer from from one document to the other, in Photoshop you would go like duplicate layer, right? And then it would show you where you're going to duplicate to, but that's not the way this app works. The way this works is copy paste. So you hit Command C on this one, go back to the other document and hit Command V. And it copies that layer to here. It adds the word copy, which is a little bit annoying to me because I don't like having extraneous type in there. So, but that's one thing. And the other thing is if you drag and drop an image into the window here, it won't add it as a layer. It'll open it as a separate document, and then you have to copy paste it in here. It's not like a smart object like in Photoshop when you drag and drop and it's a smart object and then you have to rasterize and all that stuff. You can also add layers by going to import and you import an image, and then it'll import it right into that document. I usually just drag and drop them here and then copy paste to get them in there. When you do things like this, like you color the layers, you go here, right? When you do that, if you save this as a PSD, it won't save all that. So it'll open up and they'll just be gray again. So if you're working in Clip Studio Paint, I'd recommend you just save as a CSP and you get used to that workflow. Then it'll save all your settings, and then it'll save also if you've turned on your color profile, it'll save that so that you open it again and it's already turned on. That's useful. One thing cool here is you can split your layer palette. You see, watch here. It splits it. So say you have some layers at the top that you want to look at your selections there. Okay, but this one you can scroll independently, so I can get to some of my paint layers and I can grab that selection and go to the paint layer. So if you make selections and you save them out as layers, that's another workflow thing that's kind of cool. One thing to get used to as well is like Adobe Bridge will not show CSP files, and neither will XNView, at least not properly. As far as I saw, I didn't see any viewers that would really show them correctly. If you're on a Mac, the Finder will show it though. It shows the files just fine. So if you go there to that thumbnail view, you might have to change the size so that you have what's it, under view, and then show view options, and then you can change the size of the icons, and then you can set use as default. So every time you open a window and you hit the thumbnail, it's going to be at that size. I did like group by none, sort by name, this size, and then it shows up just fine. So no matter what book I go on. So if I click on Gotham by Gaslight, issue 5, work, and then I hit the thumbnail, it shows them. And again, Adobe Bridge won't show them, and you might as well ditch Adobe entirely anyway. Windows, I'm not sure if the Explorer will show CSP files or not. I'm not working on Windows, so this is just for you Mac people. So I recommend that you mess around with the workspace and adapt it to your needs so it fits for you. This is the one I use here. It should be that one. Let's see. I'll click OK here. And that's my current workspace. I have my quick access window here. So I have like actions that I use a lot and brushes I use a lot. I have these here for the smallest size, the brush size, and you can get rid of any of those you want. You go there and you go delete preset. It had a bunch more, and I'm like, I don't need all those. So I have those there in case I need it, but again, use the hotkey, the Alt-Opt command for resizing. I got rid of that sizing thing that was there because I don't use it. I have my brushes here, my tools, whatever, they'll show there. My color palette here. I have this stuff here. I don't have that color wheel because I have it set up as a heads-up display. It pops up when I hit the letter C. So that's where history is. I put that there. So that's how I like my setup. Layers there, open, taking up the whole space. You have to get used to the stuff the different things you can do are up there, not at the bottom. So if you're used to Photoshop, a lot of the stuff's at the bottom. I have access to that stuff if I need it. I never really do use those. And there you have it. Letter X will switch your colors. I think I had to set that up though, actually, because it was, I think it was doing something odd with that. So let's take a look and see what I did there. Shortcut settings. Is it options? Drawing color. Switch between main color and subcolor. I think it was switch between subcolor and transparent or something like that, or maybe something else. And this is if you want it to show black and white when you hit D, just like in Photoshop. I set that there, so that's under options and under drawing color. So if I hit D, it gives me the black and white, and X switches. Masks work on the principle of transparent, and let's do this. I'm going to do that and apply a mask, the same as Photoshop. Okay, now let's fill it with the blue. Okay, now if I want to erase out of that mask, it's not black and white. It's either color or transparent. So transparent will erase. If I take a brush or an airbrush, let's say, I have A set as the hotkey for the airbrush because I use that soft one all the time. You have to go up and set up your own. Let's do it as 0. I hit 0, so that makes it 100% opacity. Now it's erasing off the mask, right? Or I can fill on the mask. Or I choose a solid color and it will apply the mask. It doesn't really matter what color it is. It's just as long as it's solid. Actually, I'm painting in color, huh? I gotta go on the mask, idiot. So if I delete on the mask, add to the mask, go there, fill on the whole layer, make sure I'm on the mask this time, delete, add to it. Now if I delete again and I choose the blue to add to it, that still works. It doesn't matter what the color is, it's whether it's transparent or not. That's how masks work. That's a little bit different. There are color controls, color adjustment layers, and I think they're called, what are they called? Correction layer. There we go. So they have a lot of the same color corrections as Photoshop. It's pretty basic though. The color correction controls are much better in Affinity Photo, but I don't really do a lot of color corrections, but you know, color balance. It's the same pretty much. You do the highlights, the halftone, the shadows. So look through those. You can right click here and go new correction layer, and you have them there, or you can go up there to layer, new correction layer. I recommend you go through here and look at each one of these and see what they're showing. Information. That's just like Photoshop, I guess, and you can go here and say which ones you want to show. So to familiarize yourself with the UI, you should go through and look at all this stuff and see what they have. They do have filters. They don't have as many as Photoshop, but they have blur, Gaussian blur, and they have noise and different stuff. Effects, distortion, they have some like warping and waves and zigzags and stuff like that. So go through and play with everything and just see what works for you, like that transfers your workflow over. Me, I use CMYK sliders because that's what I'm using. I'm generally working with safe colors, pretty much usually. But then I sometimes use the HUD, the heads-up display color picker, pressing C. Your color sets, color swatches, they're called color sets, are over here. And once you save them, you'll have access to all of them here. So you can go here and switch between them. Base, that's one of them. If you want to import Photoshop swatches, you can do that. You go import color set and then grab whatever swatches you want. These swatches are in CMYK though, so it'll give me this warning because it's going to change them in RGB, and it will change the colors a little bit. It's called base because that's the one that's my base that I work from. But like, for instance, this was 100% yellow in CMYK, and you can see what it's done to it a little bit. The file is not in CMYK though, it's in RGB, so it's, you know, it's going to convert it no matter what I do. So if I go onto this this layer here and I make this 100% Y and I fill it and then I grab it with the eyedropper, it's changed to 2,399. What was this one? 2,399. So that's based on your preferences here, what you have for these settings here, which I go over in another video when I talk about the conversion and all that stuff. Clip Studio Paint also has blending blenders, like here, if these drops, you can do blur, all sorts of different blending tools, and they're cool. And then you can download or buy. I bought these. I don't really use them very much, but mostly I just use that or that. Sometimes if I get some kind of hard edge and I don't want it, and I don't feel like redoing the brush stroke or something, you can kind of blend it out a little bit to soften something. And that's kind of a cool tool. Well, if you want to get used to Clip Studio Paint, you'll do it. What I intended to do was to just do one comic once in a while in Clip Studio Paint to kind of adjust to it and do most of my work in Photoshop and then ease off of it. But I found once I started using Clip Studio Paint that I actually much preferred it to Photoshop, and I jumped totally over and just never went back to Photoshop at all. This is like, I guess about 5 months ago, and I've done, I don't know, 200 something pages in that time in Clip Studio Paint. And I think it takes a little while to set up the hotkeys so you're comfortable with them in the UI. I recommend going through each of these tools and trying out what they do. Going through that default layout and seeing which things you want and don't want in there. And it took me like, I don't know, more than a month before I got comfortable with this UI setup like this. I mean, I was comfortable with it before that, but I kept adjusting it and moving palettes around and figuring out which things I wanted to show and which things I did not want to show. I like this color history there. I like having all my colors there, and they can be pretty narrow. I don't need them to be wide. The work area is here. If you hit the tab key, it'll open up your work area so you have more room to do stuff. If you have this showing though, and you hit the tab key, it doesn't do that. So to hide that, I hit Shift Tab. And again, as a reminder, that's there. That's the title bar. If the title bar is showing, it's not as good. Then you would have to like double click this to open it up. And then when you close it, it doesn't go back. And you want it to go back so that you can see all your files or whatever. Oh, this is another cool thing in the UI. You can see which files you have here. So say you have like 20 pages open and they're kind of hard to figure out which one's which. You can go there and choose them. It shows a little asterisk when the page needs to be saved. So it says, you see the asterisk at the end of the file name. Anyway, there you go. So if I was you and I wanted to switch to Clip, I would do what I did. Just start working in it and start adjusting your hotkeys and import your brushes and just jump in and start painting and see what you can do with the software. It's pretty great software, and it's usually on sale a few times a year for like half price or something, like $25. And that's like a forever license. And then I think I subscribed to like, I think it was like $12 or $15 for a year of updates to the app for free. So, I mean, it's not for free. I paid for it, but I went ahead and subscribed to that because I want to get updates. But that's for an entire year. In Photoshop, even the cheapest plan is $10 a year, or $10 a month. So it's $120 a year for the cheapest plan. This is far, far cheaper, but that's not why I'm using it. I'm using it because it's better software for painting, in my opinion, and it helps me achieve my goals more easily. The brushes have better pressure sensitivity and are more responsive than they are in Photoshop for me on my setup. I don't know how it will be for you on your setup, but for me, it's kind of brought more joy back into painting again. And it's not like I was jaded or anything, but Photoshop, I've spent a lot of time yelling at the software. Clip Studio Paint has some things that act up once in a while, like the actions sometimes don't play back correctly or they do weird stuff, and it does have some things happen now and then. I can't recall something right now, but it's far less of the weird crap than Adobe as far as I'm concerned. And once you customize your UI and you're comfortable with how this is all set up so that it works best for you, and you get used to doing things and hiding things and all that stuff, I think you're going to enjoy it. So jump aboard and ditch Adobe and come play with Clip Studio Paint. I'll see you next time.